Welcome to Wisdom of Zodiac Signs, a space where astrology is not treated like fast food predictions or glittery memes, but as a living language of the soul, woven together with psychology, history, and the quiet guidance of spiritual traditions. Here we take the signs seriously, but not so seriously that we forget to laugh at ourselves along the way. My name may not be written in the stars, but I have spent years studying how those stars reflect in human hearts, and today we are diving into one of the most misunderstood storms of the zodiac: what happens when a Cancer woman is mad at you. Now, if you've ever been close to a Cancer woman, you know the experience is both beautiful and bewildering. She is ruled by the moon, and that means her inner world is tidal. There are high waves of affection and deep currents of intuition. To love her is to enter sacred waters where devotion is fierce and loyalty runs deeper than the ocean. But when she is hurt, she does not always roar like fire or slam doors like a stormy Leo. Instead, she often retreats into silence, and that silence can feel louder than thunder. One minute she's nurturing you with the tenderness of a saint, the next she vanishes into her shell, leaving you to wonder if you've just been exiled from paradise. The truth is, you will always know when a Cancer woman is angry, but the signs are coded. Sometimes they come wrapped in sarcasm, sometimes in an almost monk-like withdrawal, and sometimes in the subtle disappearance of her warmth. This isn't cruelty, it is her way of protecting her fragile inner sanctum while she sorts through waves of emotion. The untrained eye may mistake it for indifference, but anyone with patience and a little humor will recognize it for what it is: a storm that asks not to be fought, but to be understood. So today we are going to chart that landscape together, not with a checklist of red flags, but with the wisdom of astrology, the clarity of psychology, and the compassion found in Buddhist teachings. And yes, we'll sprinkle in a bit of humor, because if you cannot laugh while learning how to navigate the moods of a moon-ruled woman, you might as well pack a life jacket. By the end of this journey, you won't just see the signs of her anger, you'll understand the deeper lesson her tides are trying to teach. Let us take a long, deliberate walk through the mysterious landscape of the Cancer woman's emotional world. I have spent decades observing human nature, studying not just astrology but also psychology, philosophy, and the delicate fabric of relationships, and I can tell you this: when a Cancer woman is upset, you are not dealing with a small breeze. You are stepping into the territory of tides, storms, and moonlight shadows. The signs are not always obvious. They rarely come with shouting or dramatic fireworks. More often, they arrive like whispers, like shifting waters, like subtle changes in the air. And if you're wise enough to notice them, you'll realize she's not trying to punish you, she's trying to protect herself. Let's begin with what I like to call the silent retreat, the signature move of Cancer energy. Imagine you've had an argument, maybe something trivial, like forgetting to reply to her message, or something heavier, like not recognizing how much effort she put into your relationship. With some signs, you'd get an explosion, a heated debate, or at least a sharp comment. But with Cancer, the warmth fades. The long conversations suddenly shrink into single-word replies. The affectionate touches or those late-night emojis disappear. Even the atmosphere around her feels different, like a cozy room that has suddenly lost its fire. Now, here's the truth many people misunderstand: this is not her way of punishing you. This is her natural defense, just as the crab, her symbol, retreats into its shell when danger approaches. A Cancer woman feels things more deeply than she admits, and that depth requires solitude. She needs time to sit with her own heart, to decide what stings, to separate what's important from what's noise. And if you press her in that moment, if you insist she talks right now, or if you try to solve the problem on your schedule, you will only push her further into that protective space. I often compare this to the sea itself. A sudden silence from her is not the end of the ocean. It is the pause before the tide returns, the regrouping of waters beneath the surface. In Buddhist teaching, retreat is not weakness. It is the gathering of strength, the sacred act of returning to the self. A Cancer woman embodies this. She does not disappear to abandon you. She disappears to find herself again. So what should you do? You respect the silence. You let her be. Think of it as giving her a safe temple where her emotions can settle. Trust that when the waters calm, she will re-emerge, not as someone who has forgotten, but as someone who is ready to meet you with clarity. In fact, the fastest way to lose her trust is to crowd her shell. The fastest way to gain it is to honor her need for solitude. Now, once that silence begins to lift, it would be tempting to think the storm is over. You might imagine the skies are blue again, the dinner table is back to normal, and the warmth has returned. But here lies the second stage, which I call negativity rising, the emotional fog. When a Cancer woman is still carrying anger, it may not explode, but it lingers like mist. Suddenly, she is not laughing as freely. She is not seeing the bright side. Instead, her mind circles endlessly, replaying every word you said, every detail of the conflict, as though she's running a private film festival of your mistakes. The nurturing spark that usually lights her up may seem dimmed, replaced by anxiety or quiet doubt. It is not because she no longer loves you. It is because she hasn't yet finished processing the wound. Her mind, like the moon that rules her, circles and circles, tugging at the tides of memory and fear. She is asking herself, can I trust him again? Will this happen in the future? Does he really understand me, or am I building my world on sand? In psychology, there is a term for this, catastrophizing. Expecting the worst, rehearsing the pain, preparing the heart for another blow so it doesn't come as a surprise. For Cancer, who values security more than almost any other sign, this is not just an anxious habit. It is survival. When her safety is shaken, her entire being trembles. This is the moment where your response defines everything. If you try to shut her down with phrases like "you're overreacting" or "let it go already," you don't just dismiss her feelings, you confirm her deepest fear that you do not understand. If you fight her negativity with defensiveness, you become another storm cloud in her sky. Instead, you must become the lighthouse. Calm. Grounded. Steady. You don't fight the fog, you shine through it. You don't argue with her fear, you acknowledge it. You let her see through your actions, not just your words, that you are still standing by her side. And yes, this takes patience. But understand this, she doesn't need you to be perfect. She needs to feel safe with you again. That is what clears the fog. I sometimes joke that loving a Cancer woman is like getting a subscription to the lunar calendar. You will always have phases, and you'd better learn when it's full moon and when it's new. But beneath the humor is something serious. Her phases are not flaws. They are the rhythms of someone who feels the world deeply, who loves with her entire being, and who simply wants to know that the person she gives her heart to will honor that depth. So whether she is withdrawing into her shell or circling through doubt, the lesson is the same: do not fear her silence, and do not fear her negativity. They are not signs of the end. They are part of the process, the tides pulling back before they return. If you can meet her with patience, with calm, with the steady light of someone who chooses to understand instead of dismiss, you will not only calm her storms, you will win her trust in ways that last far longer than any single argument. And perhaps this is the deeper wisdom Cancer offers us all. We, too, withdraw when hurt. We, too, catastrophize when afraid. By learning how to love a Cancer woman through her anger, we learn how to face the storms within ourselves with patience, compassion, and a little humor about the tides that move us all. When we talk about Cancer women and their anger, we cannot avoid one of the most famous parts of their emotional architecture: mood swings. Cancer is ruled by the moon, and the moon never sits still. Sailors have charted their maps by its light, mystics have prayed to it, poets have written entire epics about its shifting glow, and every human being has, in some way, felt the push and pull of its rhythm. For the Cancer woman, this lunar current is not a distant metaphor. It is an intimate truth. Her moods rise and fall just as the tides do. And when she's upset, those changes become sharper, more dramatic, like a full moon caught in a storm. One moment, she may be glowing with laughter, sharing stories that make you feel like the luckiest person alive. Then suddenly, like a cloud passing over the moon, her expression shifts. Tears come. Or worse, silence comes. In the span of an evening, you might experience joy, frustration, tenderness, and confusion, sometimes all before dessert is served. For those who are unprepared, this feels like emotional whiplash. But to those who have studied her rhythms, it is nothing random. It is the echo of unresolved feelings moving through her, seeking release in waves rather than in a single outburst. I once joked with a Cancer friend that dating her was like subscribing to the lunar calendar. Better check if it's a waxing crescent or a waning gibbous before planning a date night, I said. She laughed so hard she nearly cried, then admitted it was true. Her moods weren't unpredictable, they were cyclical. And like the moon, they demanded patience. The challenge here is not to panic when the tide rises. Many people make the mistake of diving headfirst into her waves, trying to fix each emotional turn as though it were a problem to solve. That only exhausts both of you. The wiser path is steadiness. Think of yourself as the shoreline. No matter how high the tide comes, you remain solid. When you meet her joy, be present in it. When you meet her tears, sit calmly beside her. When you meet her anger, don't add fuel, but don't run away either. Your groundedness is what eventually allows her to calm, just as the moon inevitably cycles back to balance. Now, sometimes her anger does not manifest in tides of feeling but in a quieter, more alarming form, absence. What I call the disappearing act. Suddenly she is no longer at home as much. She stays later at work. She spends more evenings with friends. She cancels plans with vague excuses. At night, instead of curling up beside you, she scrolls through her phone until her eyes close. The warmth that once defined her presence begins to feel like a memory. This is not about punishing you. It is not her way of saying, "I'll show him." It is about protection. Remember, Cancer invests deeply in her relationships. She pours her heart in fully, often without reserve. So when she feels betrayed, disrespected, or dismissed, she withdraws her energy before you can wound her further. If trust has been broken, her absence is a shield. She goes out into the world not to replace you, but to protect herself from confronting the pain she cannot yet put into words. And here lies the danger: physical absence can be a symptom of emotional absence. In Buddhist teaching, there is a saying that sometimes the body departs only after the mind has already left. A Cancer woman may leave the room, but the more urgent truth is that her heart may already be halfway out the door. If you want her back, you cannot simply demand her presence. You cannot corner her with "Why are you always out?" or "Who are you with?" Control will only push her further away. What works is gentleness and honesty. You acknowledge the distance without accusation. You take responsibility if you have contributed to the rift. And most importantly, you show consistency. Not with a grand gesture of flowers and apologies that vanish the next day, but with steady action, like bricks laid one by one to rebuild a house of trust. If you have hurt her, she needs to see not once, but repeatedly that you are committed to repairing what was broken. I have seen this countless times in my research and in my personal life. The partners who succeed with Cancer women are those who understand that love is not a performance but a practice. You cannot win her back with one speech. You win her back with persistence, patience, and humility. And if you succeed, you don't just restore the relationship, you build something stronger than before. So whether you are facing the lunar roller coaster of her moods or the unnerving quiet of her absence, the wisdom remains the same. Do not fear her tides, and do not dismiss her withdrawal. These are not endings but invitations, challenges to show whether your love can weather uncertainty. Humor helps, yes, but so does humility. If you can be the steady rock to her waves, the open home she wants to return to, then what feels like a storm becomes instead the very process through which love deepens. Passive aggression in a Cancer woman is a bit like the crab's sideways walk. She rarely moves straight toward the heart of conflict, preferring instead to circle around it with subtle gestures. Instead of an explosive argument, you get sarcasm slipped into casual remarks, a sigh that hangs longer than necessary, or the infamous cold fine that doesn't sound fine at all. It's as though you're walking down a hallway where the lights keep flickering. Clearly something is wrong with the wiring, but she refuses to flip the switch and announce, "I'm mad because of this." To the untrained partner, this can feel maddening, even unfair. Yet to the Cancer woman, it feels safer. Direct confrontation feels too risky, too exposing, too vulnerable. By delivering her discontent through sideways remarks, she maintains control while silently testing whether you're attentive enough to notice. In her own way, she's asking, "Do you see my pain, or are you too busy defending yourself?" This is where many relationships stumble. The natural temptation is to meet sarcasm with sarcasm, or to roll your eyes and retreat into your own silence. But that response only escalates the quiet war and confirms her suspicion that you are unwilling to meet her where she is. The better path, one I've seen work across years of study and countless conversations, is calm presence. You gently acknowledge what you sense without accusation. A simple, "I feel like something's wrong, and I'd like to understand," opens a doorway. It shows her you're paying attention, that you value her feelings enough to ask without judgment. Most Cancer women, when they sense this steadiness, begin to soften. Their passive aggression is not a fortress, it is a test. And once they know you've passed it, the walls begin to lower. Now, if we step back and view the larger pattern, the lesson becomes clearer. A Cancer woman's anger does not arrive as loud chaos. It reveals itself in storms of silence, in the fog of negativity, in the tides of mood swings, in the emptiness of absence, and finally, in the flickering lamps of passive aggression. Each stage is less about attacking you and more about protecting herself. Her emotional world is tidal ruled by the moon, fluctuating between fullness and retreat, and anger, for her, is a signal that her inner sanctuary feels threatened. So if you are wise, you won't interpret these storms as the end of love. You will recognize them as invitations to grow deeper into patience, empathy, and presence. In Buddhist thought, even suffering is not an obstacle but a teacher, a chance to practice compassion. The same is true here. When you meet her sideways dance not with frustration but with honesty and calm, you turn conflict into intimacy. You show her that her heart can remain open because you are steady enough to hold it. And when she feels that, her love does not just return, it deepens. After many years of studying astrology, psychology, and the way human beings stumble toward and away from each other, I've come to believe that Cancer teaches us something much larger than the details of one zodiac sign. At its core, Cancer represents that part of all of us that craves safety before vulnerability, that part of us that retreats when wounded, that part that overthinks every detail because the heart wants to feel secure before it dares to open again. You don't have to be a Cancer woman to understand this impulse. You only need to be human. And here's the irony, by learning how to love a Cancer woman in her stormiest moments, you're actually learning how to love the hidden, fragile parts of yourself and by extension, the hidden vulnerabilities of everyone around you. This is why her anger matters beyond the relationship. It's not just about surviving an argument over who forgot to take out the trash or why you didn't text back. It's about cultivating the skill to sit with another person's storms without flinching, without rushing to fix, without defending yourself to death. It's about standing still in the tide and saying, I see you. I hear you. I'm not running. The Cancer woman, whether she realizes it or not, becomes a teacher here. She forces you to expand your patience, to deepen your empathy, and if you're willing to laugh at yourself when you realize how much of her storm mirrors your own. And here's where the broader spiritual arc arrives. We call 2025 the year of triumph not because the world suddenly hands out victories like free samples at a grocery store, but because triumph requires inner mastery. The true chosen ones are not the people who avoid conflict, not the ones who run from discomfort, but the ones who learn to walk straight through the storm with compassion, wisdom, and yes, a dash of humor. If you can survive the mercurial moods of a Cancer woman without losing your own center, life is preparing you for something far greater. You're not just passing the relationship test, you're repassing the human test. So when you're in the middle of her storm, when she withdraws, when she brims with negativity, when she swings from laughter to tears in the space of 10 minutes, when she disappears into her outside world, or when she sends passive-aggressive lightning bolts your way, don't see it as punishment. See it as initiation. Every wave that crashes against you is teaching you to hold steady, to cultivate the strength of presence rather than the reflex of panic. If you can handle her tides with grace, you are being trained in the most important skill of all, to love without conditions. Now, how do you put this into practice? It is simple to list, difficult to live. Respect her retreat. Sit calmly with her negativity instead of trying to fight it away. Stay steady through her mood swings. Rebuild trust when she pulls back. And face her passive aggression with gentle honesty, rather than barbed replies. None of this will feel glamorous. You won't always get applause for it. But the reward comes in the bond that grows. Because the goal is not to win arguments or keep score. The goal is to show her and yourself that love can withstand storms. And when you succeed, something remarkable happens. You don't just calm the waters for the moment. You come out stronger. She comes out safer. And together, you build the kind of relationship that doesn't just survive the tide, but thrives because of it. That is the deeper promise behind Cancer's lessons, that if you dare to honor the storm, you earn the peace. So let me turn the question back to you. Have you ever found yourself in the middle of a Cancer woman's emotional storm? How did you handle it? Did you try to fix it, run from it, or did you manage to anchor yourself through the tide? Share your story in the comments, not just for me but for everyone else learning how to navigate the same ocean. And if you found this exploration meaningful, do me a favor, like this video, share it with someone who might need the reminder, and most importantly, subscribe to Wisdom of Zodiac Signs. This channel is not about fortune cookie blurbs. It's about peeling back the layers of astrology until we touch the raw wisdom underneath, the kind that has guided human beings for thousands of years. The moon may change nightly, yes, but wisdom, once gained, is timeless.